the truth. You can't handle the truth.
What do all men in power want? More power.
My name is Gianluca Zanna. I was an Italian by birth, and I became an American by choice. Our lives and freedoms are in danger. This is not a drill. If you're listening to this broadcasting, you are the resistance.
All systems go.
Welcome to Love, Guns, and Freedom.
We're not afraid.
Here we go, guys. Another Sunday, another show. You're listening to Love, Guns, and Freedom with Luca Zanna on K-Talks 1340 AM and on United States.fm network. This world is getting crazier and crazier. And at the same time, I say it's exciting to live in this reality, because I believe we are making history, or at least history it is in the happening. Don't get me wrong. I wish we didn't have to face this. I wish we were living like an ideal world. But, I really realized that after all, maybe there is not an ideal world. I realized that the struggle between tyranny and freedom, between the good and evil, has been since ever, since the creation of humanity. So nothing new. The only different things are going to be the players, but the pretty much this sort of let's say combination of energies, good against evil, is something that's been going forever. Now, the purpose of this show, as I said, it is not to entertain, but try to learn from each other, try to get inspiration from each other, because I really believe we need everybody out there. And when I say we need everybody for what? We need everybody to get back our basic rights of human beings as individuals, exactly the opposite of what they're trying to push on us, this collectivist sort of utopia that for me it is a nightmare. So I like when I find on the internet, and in this case on Facebook, like-minded people that not only they believe in the same things that we believe, or I believe, at least speaking for myself, but also they know how to articulate it, and they know how to express themselves probably in a much better way than this guy from Italy that barely can speak English sometimes. So I'm able today to bring you a very interesting gentleman. His name is Robert McGee, and it is a kind of a very interesting guy. First of all, he's not a guy, he's a man, but let's say he has a very interesting background. He's a book author, but he's also much more than that. And there is a book specifically that I really like to talk about a little bit, and I believe that is something connected to what's going on right now in our country. But let me bring the gentleman in, and he can tell us a little bit more about himself. His name is Robert McGee. Robert, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Before we go ahead and we talk about your book, give us a little bit about your professional background, because you are kind of a multi-talent person, from professor to attorney, CPA. Give us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I started off as an accounting major as an undergraduate, and I thought that was boring, so I became an economics major. But then after I got out of school, I started working in accounting, so I went back to school and I got a CPA and passed the CPA exam. I got a PhD in accounting. I actually have 13 doctorates.
Wow.
From the United States and 4 European countries. I did them all part-time while I was working full-time.
Wow.
I have 2 doctorates in law, a JD and a PhD. I'm a licensed attorney in New York. I'm a licensed CPA in Ohio. I used to be a tax attorney in Manhattan and northern New Jersey. I've also been teaching in a variety of universities here and there. I'm currently at Fayetteville State University. I was at Seton Hall University in New Jersey for 18 years, and Florida International University and a few others. I teach mostly accounting, but sometimes I teach economics, because a few of my doctorates are in economics as well. I've published 58 nonfiction books and about 720 articles, something like that. I've recently started publishing novels. Starting in 2004, my first novel came out, and I have a few novellas as well. And I also compete in Taekwondo tournaments. Last June, I competed for the World Championship and got 3 silver medals.
Wow.
Which means I got beat,
I know,
I compete in the 60 to 99-year-old category, so I'm competing against old, slow people. So, but I still got beat. I got 3 silver medals. So there's always room for improvement.
I agree. But, it's very exciting because there's also another purpose of of this show is to show that, we as a free human beings, or at least when we are free, freedom is the biggest maneuver to accomplish our dreams, to unleash our potential. And that's what I think is beautiful for me about this country, at least what used to be beautiful. I remember I came to America in 1998, okay? It wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong. Already went through a process of different from what we used to be. But for me, coming from Europe, coming from Italy, just the opportunities, just to think all the things I wanted to do, I was able to do, and it's amazing, and I feel that type of sense of almost urgency in you, like I had, to try to use this time in the best way you can, this physical time we've been given on this life to do beautiful things, to learn, to share, to produce. So this is exciting. I'm glad to have met you, and thank you. I wanted to thank you again. Maybe I never really did. To have, and I don't know how, but we became friends on Facebook, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you again for the invitation.
Perfect.
When I part of what I did when I was working as an accountant and an attorney and stuff, and even now I still go abroad to give lectures, but I've been to over 40 countries. I've worked or lectured in over 30, and whenever I'm there, I try to get a little feel for the country. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, the United States is still the best country on earth.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's going downhill.
Yeah,
and some other countries are getting better each year. We seem to be getting worse. We're moving toward collectivism. They're moving toward free markets. And I don't know where I would go if I had to escape. Because America is still a good country. It's just going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and it's sad because you're right. It's still the best country, but the problem is that the rest of the world sucks. I mean, I don't want to feel better just because the rest is already down to the bottom. We are coming to a point, if we don't stop this trend, this is completely now from a soft tyranny. We're coming down to a complete hard tyranny. And even from a point of view of business, as a person who wants to be an entrepreneur, was trying to start to create. I mean, now we have much more, beside the taxation and beside, of course, all the different things now, the attitude, you didn't build that. That's right there shows you if the man acting as a president tell us that, imagine what's behind. And we are coming to a point also the red tape, all the regulations, it's sad. It's very sad because, I'm telling you, when I started my business in 1998 here, 1999, I still have opportunities here, but I see how things are changing so fast that it's not even unbelievable to think what could happen 20 years from now or less. Now, I like a lot of your posts. First of all, I start to see my Facebook friends, because I don't want to say that I don't want to have a dialogue. I don't want to have, engaging conversation about differences of opinions. I like that. But honestly, when I choose my Facebook friends, I want to feel that they are my friends and we get along on many issues. And for sure, there's some fundamental issues that I cannot compromise. One of that is I'm an individual and I'm not going to give up my individual rights for a collectivist mantra. And I found one time a beautiful post of one of my favorite authors, Ayn Rand, that says there is no difference between communism and socialism except in the means of achieving the same ultimate end. Communism proposes to enslave man by force. Socialism by vote. It is merely the difference between murder and suicide. This is Ayn Rand. So I really like that post and made me think, that's the type of people I want to be associated. How do you see right now, you as a man born in America, grew up in America, try always to create with your own, how do you see when you were a younger man or you were a boy, how America changed in the last 30, 40 years? How can you compare? And when you think really the critical moments, when you start to see those changes, because there are always some critical moments I think that we can remember. What do you think?
Well, I remember in my youth, I felt very free. I used to have a 22 caliber rifle, one-shot bolt action. I used to be able to walk down the street with that, no problem. And I lived sort of in the suburbs, but it was close to the country, and we could just walk around with guns. We didn't need government permission to do that. Then in the late 60s, early 70s, Pennsylvania, where I lived at the time, and some other states, they started having these requirements. You have to ask government permission to carry a gun, which I thought that was that was one thing that really turned me off about what's going on in America. That the Second Amendment says we have the right to keep and bear arms. Period. Shall not be infringed. And now in some places, like when I lived in New Jersey, I tried to get a gun permit. I had to wait 6 months. There's something in the New Jersey Constitution that says you shouldn't have to wait more than 30 days, but the local police just refused to process my application. And you have to get a permit for each gun. At least that was the case in New Jersey in the 1970s. It's probably even worse now.
Oh yeah, now it's probably the worst state in the which New York, New Jersey. I think it's also rated worse than California. Believe it or not, I mean it's a complete travesty. And, and don't get me wrong, guns. It's Second Amendment. It's very important, but it's coming to a point now that it's all connected. It's almost part of a logic. When you have a government that does not want to allow you to exercise your Second Amendment, you see that the rest of the bureaucracy, the rest of the regulations, and the rest also of slavery, almost I want to call it, it doesn't stop just with the Second Amendment. Also with your business, also how you can use your money that you earn, and of course your private property. I mean, now there is an infringement on everything. For example, how do you look at the fact that now government can tell us without even legislation that we cannot use anymore, or at least they try to outlaw like this wood stove, like the EPA by not even executive order, just by regulation, they said that all the wood stoves now they're supposed to be outlawed, at least illegal. Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about that particular one, but I've heard that in some places they will arrest you or fine you if you burn leaves in your front yard or backyard.
Yeah.
And I think in Canada they're outlawing wood fireplaces. I read about that.
Yeah. And even in
the EPA can just go in and confiscate your land, shut it down. If you're a farmer and there's a snail darter on your property, you can't farm because you might dig up a snail darter. And there's no kind of due process. They don't really reimburse you for your property loss.
Yeah,
and all of those regulations should be declared unconstitutional because only Congress can pass laws, but yet all these federal agencies pass the equivalent of laws anyway. And it seems more and more, thousands of pages every year are added to regulations. And John Stossel had a program about that where he showed all the regulations that were passed over the last few years. It's
exactly
stacks and stacks.
And this is my point. This is exactly why I wanted to talk about your book and what's coming right now, what's already here. The point is, yes, as the country, as America, we have a constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, we have the Declaration of Independence, and we have the men and women that before us, they sacrificed everything they had to give us this sort of a contract between the government and the people. And the Constitution, we know very well, is to constrain the government, not to constrain the people. But what if, in this case, the government is going rogue and does not want to comply anymore? And this is not an opinion. We can read the Constitution, we can see what happened the last at least 30, 40 years, not just with Obama. Congress and presidents, they are completely laughing at us with their own actions. And especially the last 7 years, we see it's been a coup. What type of final solution do we have when the watchers, nobody can anymore, even the people that are supposed to watch the watchers, I mean, people that are supposed to take care of, stop this act of tyranny, they are completely sold out or gone. I mean, look at the military. The military now has been completely eviscerated. It's been neutered. We have hundreds of top brass being fired by Obama. And we have now agencies that the top part of the agencies, they are completely following the orders. And we know that these orders, they are completely unconstitutional. What are we going to do as people? What is our final solution? What can we do?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think it was Plato or maybe Aristotle, one of those guys. I think it was Plato who said that the democracy is the last step before tyranny. Mm-hmm. And he studied the constitutions of hundreds of Grecian and other republics, and he saw a trend. There's like 6 types of government, and democracy comes right before tyranny. Because when you get a majority of the people who can vote themselves free benefits, like free welfare and free this, food stamps, all that stuff, and they can make more doing that than they can working, then you start having class conflicts, the rich against the poor and the whole gender thing and, all that so-called equality. I mean, you should have equality under the law, but there's no such thing as equality of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
The people who work harder and the people who are smarter should get more because they're smarter and they work harder. And the only way to make people equal is to chop off the people at the top. You can't really raise the people at the bottom, especially if they don't want to work to begin with, or if they don't have the ability. So, things are going in the wrong direction. Hopefully we can reverse it through the electoral process. But when you look at the kind of bozos that are going up for election these days, I mean, Bernie Sanders, 74-year-old socialist, he spent his honeymoon in Moscow. I mean, he could be president. He's ahead of Hillary at the moment, and the younger generation especially likes him. But that's because they're going to government schools and they're getting all this propaganda. I mean, I teach at a government school. Fayetteville State University is a North Carolina state institution, and I'm in the business school. We're not so bad, but in arts and sciences, they have a lot of Marxists who are proud of being Marxists.
Wow!
It's not just Fayetteville State. I've been at other schools where it's the same way. When I was at Seton Hall University, for instance, the dean we had at the time just refused to hire any heterosexual white males. There were a couple of years there where, and not just the dean of the business school, but the person who was president at the time, he was hiring all kinds of people on the basis of ethnicity and gender, and without regard to ability. Ability was totally secondary. In fact, if you spoke about ability and merit, you were accused of being a racist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and the universities are pumping out the new generation of students, and they're listening to that crap, and they don't hear the opposing views. They're all in favor of diversity as far as ethnicity and gender preferences, but when it comes to having a couple of Republicans in the sociology department, then that's it's totally off limits. And you can be any kind of Marxist you want to be, or a progressive, which is sort of the same thing. And but you can't really be a conservative Republican, and God forbid you're a libertarian, because then you're racist, a sexist, and everything else in their eyes. And if you call for minimum government, that's a sexist comment or a racist comment, and blah blah blah. And so I don't have to put up with too much of that because I'm in the business school. But I do have meetings where people from arts and sciences are there, and they'll actually correct the speaker sometime if he or she makes some kind of a comment that they're offended by. And they get offended by everything. They even have a term for it now. It's called microaggressions.
Mm-hmm.
Where,
yes.
If you say anything that's even moderately offensive to somebody, they charge you with a microaggression. And in some university systems, the University of California comes to mind, they even have policies about that. No microaggressions.
Yeah.
Forget about free speech.
Yes.
There's only certain topics you can talk about. Sometimes they have what they call free speech zones, where there's a little place where you can say anything you want. But even then, you get accused of microaggressions. And if you're an untenured professor, you don't go in the free speech zones because the people on the tenure committee might say that he's guilty of microaggressions or something. So,
yes, Robert, let me tell me if you agree with me. I'm a little younger than you are, but I've been seeing this from a bigger. This is not a plan that happens like the last 20 years. This is a long-term plan, and what I see now, it's almost like they've been waiting for this for a long time. They've been brainwashing generation after generation, and I give you an example. There are. Just, for example, former president of Russia, Mr. Khrushchev, okay? I mean, not that long ago, when talking about a few decades ago, he said, we cannot expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until they awaken one day to find they have communism. And look, for example, people like Sanders, or people even on the other side, because many Republicans, they are phony Republicans, and they're just, masquerade, and they're working for the same type of socialism. So now, after 40, 50, 60 years, in my humble opinion, since the creation of the private Federal Reserve with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, one of the goals of Karl Marx to create a central bank that is going to start to impose on free human beings this sort of taxation system that we know very well that it's a scam, because all it does, this income tax, it pays the interest on the debt on this entity called the Federal Reserve. So since then, they've been working for sure to brainwash our generation after generation. Now we are living in a nightmare, as you said. We have young people, they have no idea what we're supposed to be as Americans, as human beings, but they just memorize the mantra, safe space and socialism is good. But then when you ask one of these people what defines socialism, they don't even know what it is. So I think it's very important to go back to try to share information, educate people. And that's why I think what you're doing, even just as educator, as a professor, even of course it's just relegated to economy or whatever you're doing, it is very important to have people like you in the education system. Question, do you have any type of, I don't know, situation where normally with other professors or other teachers, you look like a little bit like out of place, considering what is the average now professor is in this America of 2016?
Yeah, well, a lot of professors are out of touch with the marketplace. In fact, there's sort of an inside joke within business schools that the reason we have so many of these professors who think that way is because they can't make it on the outside. The university is sort of like an insulated cocoon where, people who can't make it on the outside, who don't have marketable skills, will still find a place to work and to get an income. That's, again, I'm hammering social science or arts and sciences, but there are some socialists in the business school too, a few, but universities attract a certain kind of people for both professors and administrators. You can be a university administrator and be very incompetent and not get fired. Mm-hmm. And, if things don't work out, they just try to increase the budget or something. And there's not much of a penalty for being incompetent. Wow. And if you're tenured, it's pretty hard to get fired. Not impossible. But again, if you're Marxist in arts and sciences, they'll just push you through the system and you'll get tenured. But if you try to point out the errors of socialism, then first of all, a lot of universities won't hire you. Mm-hmm. And they can tell in advance if you're a free market person because you have to give them a list of your publications.
Yeah, exactly.
And once they see what journals you get published in and the titles of your articles and books, they'll say, well, we really need someone like this. We need another person to push the progressive agenda or something.
Okay, interesting. So, now, let's go one second. I never really had the chance to ask you, first of all, your official website, if you can share it with the listeners, because there is a lot of interesting things there among the books. What is your website, please?
Yes, it's robertwmcgee.com. That's RobertWMCGEE.com.
And I see here in your bio, beside the different things that you've done as a professional, you have published 58 non-fiction books and more than 700 articles in countless disciplines. I mean, do you sleep at night? Because I tell you, I'm trying to work on normally I write songs, but I'm trying to work on my first 2 books, and it seems like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to find time during the day. When did you start writing books, since we go now into the books situation?
Well, my first article was in 1975. I was working as a tax accountant in industry at the time, and the guy who was sitting at the desk next to me published an article in a tax journal, mm-hmm. and he was always coming to me to ask questions about things. And so I figured, wow, if he can publish an article, maybe I'll give it a try. Okay. And so I wrote an article, submitted it, and it was accepted, and then I thought, wow, this must be a mistake. So I wrote another article just to see if I could get it published. And they accepted that one too.
Wow,
and so that's how I got started. Then I started writing books after that, and I started getting a reputation where publishers would come to me and ask if I could write something for them.
Wow.
And that's a really good position to be in if you're an author, because otherwise you have to go scrambling, begging, and pleading with these publishers to publish something for practically no royalties and stuff.
Yeah.
But luckily, I'm not at that stage anymore where they're
mm-hmm.
now coming to me. So.
You tell me something, because normally I'm in the publishing business of music. I'm just now starting a new journey. It's more for personal things. I want to share something. I can almost put into into something concrete, something that can be shared with others, knowledge, something I learned. So it's more manual. But the idea now that with the internet especially, and new outlets like, for example, Amazon and the digital formats, is really that necessary anymore to have a publisher when you can, after all, reach directly your readers through the internet? How do you see the revolution? Is there a revolution that you can notice as an author with the new technology of the internet?
Oh, yeah, definitely. In book publishing, there are 6 major publishers. I mean, there are hundreds or thousands of little ones, but there are 6 major publishers, and they feel threatened because people like me are cutting into their markets. In fact, there's a really, really famous author, Barry Eisler. He writes thrillers. I've read almost everything that he's written. And he had a deal with one of the big 6, and they offered him $500,000 for his next 2 books. And he turned it down, and he decided to go independent.
Wow.
Because he could make more doing it himself. Those traditional publishers, first of all, they go through your book and they re-edit everything you've written. You don't have any kind of editorial control. And some of those editors are politically correct, you know? You can't say certain things. You can't use certain words. So you have to give up your freedom in order to get a Big 6 contract, usually. And then they don't pay that much in royalties compared to what you could get on the Internet. Like, for instance, my ebooks, Amazon pays 70% for ebooks. My royalties on the ebooks are 70%. And that's standard.
Yep.
You could even negotiate for more if you're Barry Eisler. And if I went with a traditional publisher, the ebook royalties would be 25%.
Yes.
And unless you're a really best-selling author, you're going to have to do all the marketing yourself anyway. So the publishing company doesn't give you much assistance in the way of publishing. And the nice thing about this revolution, and it really is a revolution in publishing, is that anybody who has something to say, or even if they don't have anything to say, they can get it published. Of course, the downside of that is there's a lot of crap on Amazon.com.
Yes.
And, they have these free books that you can download, and, I downloaded a few of those and I read them, and I could see why they're free. They're crap for the most part. But there's some excellent stuff on there, too.
Yes.
And now with ebooks, you can get a really, really good book for $2.99 or $5.99 or something.
Yes.
Instead of $20 or $30 for hardcover. And I'm sort of running out of shelf space here at home. I have a bunch of books and shelves and things, and the wife's always complaining. Every time I buy a book, I have to sneak it in so she doesn't see it, But with ebooks, they don't take up any space, and they're a lot cheaper, $2.99 or $5.99 instead of $20 or $30. So I can afford to buy even more books, and she doesn't even know about it because they're on my iPad.
That's true. That's true. One thing I agree with you. I like ebooks a lot, and I think it's powerful because you can download the ebook in 1 second, okay? And it's going to be much more direct. But at the same time, I tell you, I have the same problem of yours. I'm running out of space. I love books. 2 things I really enjoy in life, it's books and guns, and I'm running out of space for both, but especially for books. But I tell you, even I like ebooks for that idea. I don't know. It's something still I'm attached to the paper. I can bring it with me. I can, bring it in a way that is more personal. I don't know. But I agree with you. It's much more powerful to spread the message, the information through the digital format. Now, talking about books, your book, I was pretty fascinated about the title and also about the synopsis, the little summary of the book. I didn't read the book, and I want to buy it now. Probably I want to buy the Kindle. It's easy. It's called Justifiable Homicide, Political Thriller. Tell us a little bit about what is about this book, and then I'll tell you why I was kind of captivated about your story. Give us a little bit the short story of the book.
Okay, well, I'd like to read the synopsis. It's only 4.5 lines. That pretty well summarizes it.
Yes.
And it took me a few months to get this. I kept editing and editing and editing. So I'll just read it. It's 4.5 lines. It says, when does the killing of political leaders become morally justifiable? Killing the Hitlers, Stalins, and Pol Pots of the world is easy to justify. Murderous tyrants need to be killed. But what if our leaders are merely idiots, or perhaps corrupt, petty tyrants who aren't in the same league as Hitler, Stalin, or Pol Pot? How much damage can we allow them to do? How many of our rights can we allow them to take away before killing them becomes justifiable homicide? And that's what the book is about. It's 129,000 words.
Wow.
It's a group of Miami patriots, so to speak, that they decide that some politicians and other non-politicians have crossed the line and that they've taken away too many of our rights and it's time to get back. And since the system is broke down, they go through a series of targeted assassinations to kill all these people. But they can't decide who they should put on the list, what the criteria should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how evil do they have to be? And so they start fighting among themselves. And I try to introduce as much conflict as possible. And in fact, when I was learning how to write novels, I took a course on how to write novels, and the person who taught the course said that if you don't have conflict in a chapter, it's not a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to have some kind of conflict, either between the people versus some politician or between the members of this group. And so I try to keep it rolling going forward that way so that people won't want to keep turning the pages.
Wow, no, I'm captivated just from the synopsis, I'm telling you. Unfortunately, this is not anymore. I mean, of course, this is a novel just for the listeners and for Homeland Security and NSA that I know listening sometimes, most of the times. We're talking about a novel here, okay? It's called Freedom of Speech.
It's entertainment.
Okay, entertainment.
But not a set of guidelines for how to do it.
Yeah, but Robert, unfortunately, we're living in a new America now, ending with a K, not anymore with C. And I'm sure you're familiar about the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, the clause of indefinite detention. Now, technically, the government or somebody in the government, directly from the president's office, for sure, they can declare any one of us terrorist. That we know is a big word. You know, had to disagree with the government. And just because suspected with no due process, no trial, we can be detained, indefinite detained, and use the military against us. They are now also the latest executive order and also piece of legislation from the Senate. They pretty much authorize completely the use of military on U.S. soil too. So, you know, it's not more a game. This is not a game. Even for people like, let's say you're writing a book, it is a book, is a novel, and maybe now nothing is going to happen. I'm sure everything's fine. But I wouldn't be surprised in the near future, like we were saying before, because people may feel offended, or maybe they can say for national security, or maybe because you may give ideas to terrorists, I wouldn't be surprised they will start to try to rewrite the First Amendment. And books like yours, I hope I'm to be wrong, they will try to ban them, or to somehow to destroy them, or to try to find a way to give them to the public. What do you think? Is something so impossible as a scenario?
Oh, no, it's not impossible at all. Yeah, some things I say in the book are highly offensive to people, and then I want some of the things I say to be highly offensive to some people. And this has been translated into several languages, and my German translator told me there's certain things I couldn't say in Germany because that would be considered offensive to some people, and I could actually be arrested if I were in Germany for saying some of the things.
Exactly.
You know, it's all about freedom and stuff. And it's like that in some other countries, too. Certain things you can't say. If you criticize certain groups, you can be fined or even imprisoned. France is another country like that.
Yep.
And England is another one. One of those talk show hosts was at Levin or Savage. One of those guys, he's been banned from Britain because of something he said. I don't know what he said.
Savage was Mike Savage, you know. But you don't need to say much. I mean, think about it. You know, in Italy just last year, there was a publisher who was sentenced to 6 months in jail, okay? Because he reprinted a book called The Protocols of Zion, okay? The people, you know, may believe or not, whatever. It's a book. You can look at that any way you want it. And he was sued by the synagogue of Turin or whatever. And he has to pay a big fine. And I think he had to do also some jail time. I mean, think about it for a book. And I read the book. I have 2 copies on my, my library. And he said, very honestly, there is not really nothing that you should think about it that is terrible. It's not like I say, let's go and kill somebody. This is just a book. Amazing. And you know very well, people like, for example, Brigitte Bardot in France, just because she wrote a letter to the editor denouncing the Muslim invasion. Very polite letter. She was sentenced to pay a very hefty fine. Otherwise, she has to go to jail. So I see more and more that's what they're trying to do to America now. And are you familiar, of course, that Judge Scalia, they found him dead. And
Yeah, with a pillow over his face. That's sort of interesting. You'd think that they'd at least do an autopsy, but who's
Exactly.
preventing that, I'm wondering, you know?
You know, and that's why, you know, since you have a mind that is not just a mind of a man, that of course I think you really use your brain to try to learn, and you're not a stupid guy. I mean, you got all these degrees, you're a smart man, and on top, you know, you write this type of books. I was gonna ask you, honestly, from your experience, from your guts, also from, don't you think this is something really terrible happened here? Something never happened before. I mean, I've been here just 18 years. You were born here. You know more about what's going on. How many times happened that we have a Supreme Court justice found them close to the southern border with Mexico, and without any type of escort? We know normally they have always the Secret Service or U.S. Marshal around these federal judges, and we found them in this such a strange situation with a pill on his face, and they bring him straight from the place where they found him dead straight to the mortuary. They cremate him, and it's over. I mean, this is like on completely wrong. I mean, what do you think really is happening here?
Well, it looks like there's a cover-up. Again, ever since the internet, I read stuff on the internet, and I hesitate to believe anything anymore, you know, because there's so much
There's information too.
incorrect information there.
Yes.
But, you know, the facts are agreed on that they found him with a pillow over his head, his face, and that enough should be cause for at least an autopsy. And the fact that it wasn't conducted raises a lot of questions, a lot of issues, like, you know, who doesn't want the autopsy and who has the authority and why isn't anyone doing anything? You know, all of those things. And he was killed at a critical time, if he was killed. It's, you know, he's written some opinions that haven't been issued yet, and therefore they have no effect.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he came out against some big environmental regulation that would have practically killed or semi-killed one of Obama's environmental things. I forget the details.
Yeah, the
But
EPA.
now that opinion's no good because it wasn't issued.
Yes, the EPA, you know, was by executive order and by regulation. The EPA was pretty much completely setting new rules for standards for our economy, for our basic life as Americans, and he was part of this bringing it down, Mr. Judge Scalia, and many other things, you know, about also things like the illegal aliens executive orders of Mr. Obama, and of course the Second Amendment. I mean, this man, he was still keeping the balance of what America used to be, at least most of it. Now, as you remember, when Obama, before the election, at least when he just got elected, he wanted to change, a final change, how to change this country. And I tell you, I really believe now we are very close to the final chapter of this soap opera that is a dramatic soap opera, because when we're gonna have, if we're gonna have a different judge, even the Supreme Court is gonna be completely controlled by the elite. You know that they will try to do legally, at least to tell that it's gonna be legal to completely destroy piece by piece all the foundations of our inalienable rights. So I'm concerned. What do you think? Don't you think this is like some sort of a long-term coup? We've been invaded, we've been conquered, and the enemy right now, it's not at our gates, but it's inside the gates. Am I too extreme if I say that, or maybe you can share the same?
No. I mean, if you look at history, most empires collapse from within. That they were weakened. You know, like the Roman Empire is one good example. The various Caesars gave the people bread and circuses to keep them fed and entertained. And they took control of the Senate of Rome and the various emperors, and other empires have collapsed. The Inca Empire of Peru, for instance, they turned socialist, and then all of a sudden they disappeared because nobody wanted to produce. Everyone just wanted to consume. And a lot of times empires, or maybe even all the time, or almost all the time, empires collapse from within. They're weakened first, and then at some point there's a tipping point, and the bad guys take over.
You are also an economist. I mean, you know about economics, and what according to your guts, according to your experience, and the data that you probably reading going through, what do you think is going to happen? At least what's happening right now in 2016 to our global and more specifically to our America economy? I mean, with the I smell, and I'm not an expert like you are. I'm just a regular guy. I try to read the news and try to interpret it with my brain. I really think we are on the verge of something so big that is going to be bringing us back probably to the depression. Am I too extreme or I'm crazy? What do you think? After all, you are the guy that study all this stuff.
Well, I've been expecting it since the 1970s. From things I've been reading, the economists would say that, we're on the brink of a collapse, and it hasn't happened yet, but I think it's just a matter of time, because you look at our budget, we can't just spend $1 trillion a year more than what we take in without having bad things happen. And as you mentioned, most of our taxes go to pay the interest on the debt, and even that isn't enough, so we have to create money, print money through the Federal Reserve, an extra $1 trillion a year, more or less. And nobody even knows what the full deficit is, because some things are off balance sheet, like Social Security, for instance. How much do we really owe on that? Depends on how long people live, and they're living longer. There are fewer people putting money into the system. It's only a question of time before it goes bankrupt, unless they just print more money to fund it or something. But when they do that, whenever the Fed prints money, it takes away the purchasing power from whatever money we have in our pockets or in the bank. It's a hidden form of taxation. And if interest rates rise, then we're going to be paying more than 100% of our tax payments just for interest. And, of course, one solution is to just declare national bankruptcy, so we're not going to pay off that debt.
Yeah,
and
would be
that's
nice.
a radical solution, but that would get rid of that problem. It would cause some other problems, though. It would ripple through the economy.
And I want your opinion. You're a CPA guy, and probably maybe it's not good for your business if I tell you what I'm telling you now, but I know also you're a person who cares about America, and you know a lot of things that probably many people do not know. Did you ever heard about a documentary that I was able to watch probably 8 years ago or so? It's called American From Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo. Did you ever heard about that?
Yeah, I've heard of the book, and I read the summary, but I haven't actually read the book.
It's a DVD. It's a DVD. It's American From Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo. It's, for me, was one of the most powerful DVDs by this former Hollywood director. He was pretty famous. He did several movies. And all I can say, as a person that I know you will appreciate it, please watch this DVD. You can also watch it for free online on Google. You can find it, American From Freedom to Fascism. And the point is, when we find out really what's behind this Federal Reserve, what's behind the idea that now we are forced to pay a tax on our income as individuals, that honestly, before 1913, we didn't have to. Because you know very well, before 1913, America had the sovereign power to print their own money, and we didn't need to go to a cartel of banks that is a private corporation anyway, with shareholders, and I think it's chartered in Delaware, but regardless, that every time they print or they digitalize that number, automatically becomes $1 of debt, and we had to pay that debt with our work, real collateral. So the point is, we could go back to be free human beings, or at least pretty much close to anything like freedom on this planet could be, that we don't need to work anymore for the king, and now it's called the Federal Reserve. So even when they want to implement social programs, that we can talk about that if they are right or not, but at least we don't need to beg money from a private entity that is going to charge us the interest. Because I really believe what they're doing here, the politicians, they are working for the bankers, they're working with the bankers, and they want to max out the credit card, and every time they create a war or they create a new debt, that's more enrichment and more slavery for us and more enrichment for them, for the bankers. Am I too extreme on this conclusion? Maybe I'm to something. What do you think?
Well, I think you're headed in the right direction, but a lot of politicians don't even know who they're really working for. That's the thing, There's a saying in Washington that in order to get along, you have to go along. And in order to keep their job and keep getting reelected, they just go along. And Lindsey Graham's a perfect example of that. He calls himself a Republican, but nobody else calls him a Republican, pretty much. And Congress is filled with those people. That, the Republicans have been sort of in charge of at least one house of Congress ever since Obama got elected, or 2 years after he got elected. And they haven't put the brakes on any of this stuff. They passed just about everything he wanted. And Mitch McConnell's another pathetic example of a senator that he goes along with everything. Now he's thinking of maybe supporting Obama's appointment to the next Supreme Court vacancy, maybe, even though Obama hasn't said who that's going to be. But in order to get along, you have to go along. That's the philosophy, and certainly the banking system is involved. The one thing that really irks me is that the Federal Reserve Board has been in existence since 1913, and they've never had an audit.
Mm-hmm.
If that ever happened to a publicly traded company, the corporate officers would have gone to jail in 1914 or 1915.
Exactly.
Because we require annual audits for any publicly traded company, but the Federal Reserve Board isn't publicly traded. It's private, sort of. The president nominates the various board members, and they have 14-year terms and so forth. But they've never been audited. And even members of Congress, they can't get a majority to push through a bill that says they should be audited. No, why do they vote against it? That's the thing, what are they trying to hide? Are they all on the take? And Rand Paul wasn't on the take because he even sponsored a bill to audit the Fed. And his father, Ron Paul, also wants to audit the Fed. And Ted Cruz said he wanted to audit the Fed, but then when it came up for the vote, he was absent. So
exactly.
I don't know if that's because his wife was working for Goldman Sachs or if he was just busy. I don't know.
Well, yes, there's Cruz, is working for Goldman Sachs. For what I heard, it's easy to find out. By the way, there's not much to it. It's pretty much out there. But you're right. There is only really, really few politicians who will try to expose this scam, this cancer called Federal Reserve. I say something, regardless if, of course, we want to audit it because it's something that we should have always transparency. But the idea, even the existent, why not U.S. government? Why should we go to beg to a private corporation to print something that's supposed to be our own right as a free nation? And to print money without paying the interest to somebody else. I mean, after all, this is a complete giving away our sovereign powers, and enslaving us. That's pretty much the situation. I really think that would be stopping that problem. That would be really killing the monster at the heart, and we had the chance to take back this country back. But now the rest of the world is the same. Now let me tell you something. I'm fascinated about your bio. And speaking about all these people, like the Federal Reserve and some sort of a secret government, I see that you've been working as at least you as a consultant. You've been having clients, including the United States Agency for International Development, World Bank, and also the Central Intelligence Agency. I don't know if you can disclose exactly what type of consultant, but I'm pretty fascinated about this type of gigs that you got. I mean, working for the CIA is not everybody can do that. Can I ask you, what did you do for them?
Well, I can tell you what I did for them. Yeah, in fact, the reason I put all that stuff in my bio, it's true, by the way. I did business with all of those people. But if you're a novelist trying to sell political thrillers, it's always good if you worked for the CIA, especially.
Yes.
Or the World Bank, or African Development Bank, or USAID. And I did something for all of them, not as an employee, but as an independent consultant. And the one that everybody's interested in is the CIA, actually. What happened was one time, not many years ago, but a few years ago, I got a call from someone who said they were from the CIA, and it turned out that they were. And they read an article that I wrote about something, and they were having a conference somewhere in the metropolitan D.C. area, and they wanted me to present the results of my findings.
Wow.
And they paid me, and they gave me a 1099 form at the end of the year.
Wow.
And that was the extent of my involvement with the CIA.
That's pretty exciting, though. I mean, they read your work. That's pretty exciting. And I'm telling you, I'm sure they're reading all your books because they get ideas sometimes from authors like you. Trust me.
Yeah, they might. Yeah, but I mean, I did that one little gig for them. It was maybe 75-minute speech, maybe 60-minute speech, where I summarized the result of one of the papers that I wrote. Yeah. It's available on the internet, by the way.
Wow, and
that's how they found it. They read it on the internet.
Excellent.
And so that's it. So I can say that I was a consultant to CIA, but it was only that one gig.
That's
amazing. It was a 1099 form, not a W-2. So I was never an employee.
And what's about World Bank?
It looks great on the back of a novel that it looks great in my bio for my novel. So
it is true. It is true. I mean, it is true. Not everybody can say that. Listen, what's about the World Bank? I'm very fascinated about the World Bank too. That's part of what's going on here. What did you do for them, if I can ask you?
Well, I can summarize the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and USAID. They all have these accounting reform projects all over the world. And like in Armenia and Bosnia, I took a sabbatical from my teaching job. For Armenia, I was there for 13 months. In Bosnia, I was there for 13 months working as a consultant to USAID. Again, they gave me a 1099 form, not a W-2.
Mm-hmm.
I was an independent contractor. And what I did was I helped the finance ministry try to convert their country to international financial reporting standards. Because after the collapse of the Soviet Union and when the Berlin Wall started coming down, all these countries in the former Soviet bloc, the 15 Soviet republics and the Central Eastern European Soviet bloc, they all wanted to convert to some kind of a Western accounting system. And the system that came out of Moscow in 1930 was what they were working with, and it's a sort of inferior system. It's basically just bookkeeping. And so USAID had a sort of turnkey program where they just go into these countries and they teach a curriculum about international accounting standards.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for people to teach those courses. And so I went over there and taught some of the courses. I helped reform the curriculums in all the universities in Armenia and Bosnia as part of those USAID things. And I helped the finance ministries, and I helped them form an accounting association because they didn't really have associations under the Soviet system because that would be chipping away at the monopoly of the Communist Party, you know?
Yeah.
So all those private associations had been destroyed by communism, and USAID wanted to create private sector organizations, similar to the American Institute of CPAs kind of thing. They wanted CPA clones.
Wow.
And that's what I did. It was nothing subversive.
No, it's great.
And, the World Bank, I gave lectures about accounting, and the African Development Bank, I gave lectures about accounting. So it was nothing evil. I was just being an accounting professor. But it looks really great on my bio. As long as I don't go into the details that I was just an accounting professor.
I think it's very exciting. I tell you, it's very interesting life you have, and I'm glad that you able to put also all this knowledge and your thinking through your books. And by the way, right now while I'm talking, I'm on Amazon right now. I'm putting my shopping cart, Justifiable Homicide. And it's really exciting because I like to learn. And one thing I tell you, I never really went to school speaking the English language, and I'm sure I needed more, but the only way I was able to learn a little bit was my reading books, and I like to read interesting books. Listen, I want to give you the floor before we close. I want to give you 2 minutes. Whatever you want to say, you got the floor, okay? Robert, go ahead.
Oh, wow. 2 minutes to sell my books.
Whatever you want to say.
Well, my best book, I think, is Justifiable Homicide, a political thriller. You can get that for $2.99 on Amazon if you take the ebook version, or it's about $16 for the paperback version. That's my first novel. It's the best one in terms of pure political philosophy and current events, things like that. And I have some spin-offs. Some of them are already in print. Some of them I'm still working on. A novelette, which is like a little novel, Annie and the Senator. That's another political thriller. Mm-hmm. It's about Annie Chan. It's the first in a series where she is like a self-made woman, and she rises from the streets of Bangkok to become the president of one of the largest banks in Miami. And some senator finds out about her past. She had a sort of murky past, and he threatens to expose her unless she pays him $1 million bribe. And she has character, plus she doesn't want to do it. So she tries to find a way to kill the senator, but she's never killed anyone before. And so she has to sort of start from square one, so to speak. And I can't really tell you how it comes out because I would be giving it away. But let's just say I think you'll love the last 2 pages.
Very
and
good.
It's the first in the series. Once she learns how to kill,
mm-hmm.
and she's an immigrant who became tremendously pro-American, you know, the freedom and the whole thing, an immigrant who loves America more than most Americans. She's decided to continue to do public service work now that she knows how to kill people and she can identify who needs to be killed, kind of thing.
Wow. Very exciting. Listen, I want to thank you again for your time and for sharing your knowledge, to share your story. Give us one more time before we close your website so people can find out more about you, please.
Okay. Yeah, again, the website is robertwmcgee.com. That's MCGEE. there's a little drop-down menu there where you can find my books and a little bio and so forth. And I plan to add more books as I go along. I'd like to do 2 or 3 or 4 books a year, shorter novels that don't take so long to read through. So that's my goal anyway.
Very good. Okay, guys, don't go away. You're listening to Love, Guns, and Freedom with Luca Zanna. Then we're going for hour number 2. We're going to talk about guns. And then hour number 3, we're going to have some very interesting news, something very dramatic. It's happening to many of us, and we need to talk straight about it, okay? So let me tell you, this show, even if it's just a little humble radio show, unfortunately, we're all in danger right now. But we cannot cower up. We need to stand up. This is the time to stand up together as Americans. Don't go away. Talk to you soon.
The United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Now we are going to get America back. We the people, we're going to fight for our rights. We the people, we're not afraid to die. Now is the time to remind them what's wrong, what's right. And now is the time to get back our country, to get back our lives. They steal, then they lie, they side with the other side. They forgot that we can fight. We the people, we're going to fight for our rights. We the people, we're not afraid to die. They try to sell our country, they try to sell our rights. Love for America, no, you can't buy. Amnesty my ass, get back in the line. We are Americans, don't even try. We're ready to fight, we're not afraid to die. Traitors, you can run but you can't hide. Government of the people, by the people.